doxology to God hollow, because this is how we do it at All Things Theology. All Things Theology, All Things Theology. We chop it up properly without an apology. Gotta give doxology to God hollow, because this is how we do it at All Things Theology.
Yo, grace and peace, guys. I'm your host, Kdub, and I want to welcome you to another edition of All Things Theology. All Things Theology exists to talk about all of Christianity. All Things Theology desires for Christians to grow in every aspect of their walk. So I hope that this podcast encourages you. I want to thank those listening in on all podcast apps. Make sure you subscribe. Share the link if this blesses you. For those watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe as well. Give this video a like and drop a comment. Check out the show notes. So if there's additional information, it'll be there for you. This podcast is also a part of the Bar Network, where there's a lot of great podcasts out there. So please feel free to check that out. And if you have any questions, as always, you can email me at kdubtru@gmail.com. Well, I am very excited to have a guest, a friend of mine that we've interacted. I've been on her show. Keri Smith, how are you doing?
I'm good, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's a pleasure to have you, to talk with you. Just for the listeners out there, you have your own podcast, your own show. Why don't you tell them about that?
Yeah, we do a show called Unsafe Space, which we had the pleasure that's how I met you, was having you on for an interview. And Unsafe Space is on, you can find us on YouTube and anywhere you listen to podcasts like iTunes, or we're also on BitChute for videos. We did just get banned from Twitter yesterday.
Yes, I saw that.
So we're no longer on Twitter for now. I don't know. They haven't told us actually anything about why we were banned or if it's permanent or not. So I have no idea if we'll be back there. But you can find us at unsafespace.com if anybody wants to get more info. And we do a book club, which is kind of fun. We do every month we pick a book that's we kind of alternate fiction and nonfiction. So this month we're doing Cynical Theories which I know you just got in the mail.
Yes.
Yeah, by James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose. So if people want to join us in reading that, they still have time.
Yes, I definitely encourage those who like my content to go in, subscribe to their Keri's content. You'll be blessed. They go deep into critical issues of today, and so I think it'll be very helpful if you do so. In regards to your show, your program, the show is called Deprogrammed, right? And from what I understand, is that right?
We have, yeah. So one of the shows that we do on Unsafe Space is called Deprogrammed.
Right.
And Deprogrammed is specifically about my old ideology, which I most often call social justice ideology. So we do long form interviews for that show, where we get to talk to people about social justice in its origins in academia, or talk to people like you about social justice sort of encroachment into Christianity. And then we do other standalone interviews as well. So that's not the only show that we do. Okay. And then it's for anyone. I know your show has a Christian focus. Our show is not I wouldn't say it's a Christian podcast, but I'm a pretty new Christian, and my co-host Carter is an atheist. So you'd be surprised actually. We don't actually spend a lot of time arguing about the existence of God or anything, because I feel like we have so much in common outside of those important differences. We have so much in common that we spend most of our time talking about culture, the values that we share, like a belief in individualism, for example, and we talk a lot about, sometimes we have to talk about politics. Recently, we've been talking more about politics because of what's going on in the world.
Understandably so. You were in the social justice movement. Tell us about that. Like, what was that experience like? Just go in and tell your story about that.
Yeah. Let's see. I was in it for about 20 years.
Wow.
And I know sometimes when people, hear that. I've seen some of the feedback I've gotten from being willing to talk about it is some people who say you must be really stupid to have been in it for that long, and that's not true. There's actually, if you look at people, especially now on the outside of it, when I look at people who are in it, if I am to just assume that they're all low IQ or not very smart people, then I'm doing myself a disservice in trying to have conversations with them and help them hear what it is I'm saying.
Sure.
There's a lot of incredibly smart people who buy into this belief system. There's a lot of incredibly smart people who join cults in general. I've been watching a lot of cult documentaries recently, and I just watched the one about Heaven's Gate, and those guys, some of those guys were really intelligent. They were doing computer work. They were doing website work back when that was relatively uncommon. They were doing that, in the 90s. And they, anyway, that documentary has been on my mind because I think if people start to watch documentaries like that, it might help dispel some of the ideas that they have about why it is that people join cults,
right,
or what kind of people join cults.
Right.
But yeah, so I was indoctrinated. I went to Duke University and I was indoctrinated into it, I would say, over 2 decades ago. And when I say indoctrinated, I just mean I was introduced to this belief system through classes I took in women's studies. I took a lot of critical race theory classes. I took queer theory classes, queer studies, and I couldn't see it for what it was at the time. And obviously I couldn't see it for 2 decades, but the way in which it was introduced to me was sort of, these are some new ideas and ways to look at race and sex and sexuality, and how there's this sort of hidden system of oppression that works to marginalize certain people based on immutable identity characteristics and to privilege other people. And that, the best way to look at the world is as a struggle for power between these competing identity groups. And we need to redistribute the power between these groups, and then we'll reach some kind of equality. That's a broad overview of what the belief system is.
Right.
And it does have, I know you and I think talked about this briefly, but it does have roots in Marxism. It's different. Marxism was more about class. Marxism said that the best way to look at the world is as this struggle for wealth between class groups, and we need to redistribute the wealth. Well, this is kind of like mutated. It's like they took Marxism, they dropped the stuff about class and wealth, and they just made it about identity and power.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So even just previously there, you've been very vocal about your leaving the social justice movement, kind of being woke. You've even called it a cult. Some would ask you, why would you call it a cult? What makes this movement a cult?
Yeah. Well, I know some people also don't like that I use that word, but
Right.
I feel like I did my due diligence. I went through the cult characteristics. You can look over what are some common characteristics of cults, and it checks off a lot of the boxes. The one important one I would say, or the one obvious one that it does not check off, is there's not like one charismatic leader that you can point to. And I think that makes sometimes it makes it harder to for people to identify it as a cult-like belief system, because they're looking like, where's the Jim Jones, where's the David Koresh? I don't see that one figure, right? But not every cult has all of the characteristics, and that's one of the few it doesn't have. If you look at the other ones, it isolates you from people who do not share the belief system. It encourages you to cut off contact with people, even friends and family who don't share your beliefs. It discourages questions. You can't question the dogma, and it has a whole system set up to make you question your own sanity, or make you question your own privilege. If you have a question, if you have a serious concern or disagreement with one of the tenets of the belief system, then you're sort of coached over time, or maybe you could say brainwashed over time, to think that must be my privilege coming out. That must be something inherently wrong in me that's asking that question. And so it discourages you from looking objectively at your own
Yeah.
beliefs.
Yeah, even,
Uh,
I think it was put out that things like logic, objectivity is like roots of white supremacy and racism itself. What you're kind of getting at is like you can't even you already have to accept the premise before you can even deal with it. Otherwise, that's proof you are racism itself. Have you dealt with that as
yeah.
well?
Oh yeah. Well, that they definitely attack. I mean, I think this belief system is fundamentally opposed to individualism, to the concepts of free speech and discussion, debate, inquiry, and like you said, and logic. So
Hmm.
they attack all these things. They attack logic as being a tool of the patriarchy
Right.
or a tool of white supremacy.
Right.
They attack. The weird thing is that when they go after stuff like logic or math or these tools of reason, when they go after
Right.
reason, they have to I think it's almost like they have to do it by attaching those things to identity groups that they've already encouraged you to think of as being bad.
Right.
So that's the way they do it. Otherwise, if it was a belief system that just came out and had nothing to do with identity groups or anything, and it just said, hey, logic is bad, let's not use logic, right? Or
Right.
math is bad, let's not use math. But what they do is they've already gotten you to accept that men are privileged and they're the oppressor group, and white people are privileged and they're an oppressor group.
Mhm.
And so if they and straight people are privileged, they're an if they can tie these things and say, well, hey, logic is a tool of the straight white male world, then it's easier for them to get you to start to question logic
Yeah.
itself. It's kind of crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, I've definitely seen this, happening. Have you lost a lot of friends because of your departure for social justice or wokeism? I know, just to kind of give you I know that I lost, man, really good friends. Just being in the Christian world, because we talked about on your show how this kind of is infiltrating into the Christian world, and a lot of people are accepting this.
Yeah.
I've lost numerous good friends. Have you experienced that as well?
Yes, and
Mm.
yeah, we did talk about that, and it's I did lose friends at the beginning when I first started, and occasionally now there's still some who crop up that I haven't heard from in a while, and I wasn't aware they're still following me, and then they have a great unfriending moment.
Right.
But for the most part, most of those happened a few years ago when I first started
Mhm.
leaving the cult of belief and speaking against it and trying to articulate what it is that I find very troubling about it. And I did have a friend one of my best friends came to Texas, and while she was here, we had lunch, and we both kind of joked about it. It was sort of it felt like it was an intervention of sorts. Like, she basically had been getting a lot of calls about me and emails about me, I guess, from mutual friends who knew that she and I were very close, and were asking her, like, what's going on with Keri, and being very concerned for me. And she told me at the time, she said, humans are tribal.
Mm.
And I agreed with her. I said, I think it's in our nature to be a little tribal.
Mhm.
And she told me that I was leaving the tribe, but I wasn't just leaving the tribe. She said the tribe views you as attacking the tribe,
Mm.
and you will not be able to come back if you do this. Like, you won't be able to come back. And I said, well, I don't really think I want to come back. So that's
Right.
unfortunate, but I'm not really. And the weird thing is that one thing I took from that conversation was that, from her point of view and from the point of view of a lot of those mutual friends, they thought I had already joined another tribe. Like, from their point of view, they were saying,
Right.
she was saying, well, you've already joined another tribe. But I said, no, I think I'm trying to be nomadic as best I can. And at that time, I wasn't a Christian yet,
Mhm.
so they couldn't have meant the Christian tribe. I wasn't spouting. I still did not like Trump. I wasn't talking about him positively. So they couldn't have meant that.
Right.
And it really, I thought about it for a while afterwards, and I realized it's just basically anyone who's not in the social justice tribe is viewed as being in this. There's like two groups.
Right.
They basically see the world as two groups. It's like social justice or alt-right or Nazi or whatever they want to call it, you
Right.
know. And,
It's like if you're
and so,
not for us, you're against us, you know.
yeah, yeah, that was really eye-opening. And yeah, I lost a lot of friends. Most of them, I would say, were at the acquaintance level, people I had worked with in entertainment and in the comedy world. And so one of the ones that was a closer friend who I lost, not in a positive way at all. She basically unfriended me on Twitter publicly. She's a feminist media critic. She's a
Wow.
journalist. And she did a tweet about me and how it was sad that I was her former feminist friend, now turned red-pilled troll, or alt-right troll, or
Right.
something like that. Yeah. So, and she sent some male allies my way to pile up on. Though it's so weird. They have these that's what they use allies for,
Right.
almost, is do their bidding,
Yeah.
to pile-ons. What about you? Have you lost any close friends
Yeah. So
that?
yeah, when I first became a Christian, it's kind of funny that, that kind of transition for you, you started to become a Christian. When I first became a Christian, the guy who started really teaching me the Bible, he kind of got into this stuff. And, I remember we went out to, we kind of had an intervention one night where we met up and, we're kind of was like, I was like, yo, what's going on, man? You're kind of accepting some of these things that I'm not seeing as biblical. And he started kind of reading a little James Cone, and which is the father of Black liberation theology. For those who don't know, then James Cone didn't believe that the Bible was inspired by God, that Jesus is God, a lot of unorthodox Christian things. And I started noticing this guy was kind of being influenced in that thought, and we kind of parted ways. And that was about 2 years ago. We haven't really spoken since. And so that was hard because he was in my life for about 7, 8 years, and we would talk weekly, and so things
Yeah.
like that. It's hard, because
Yeah.
no one wants to leave these deep friendships we have. And so for me, that was definitely hard.
Yeah, I would say the friend who came out and had the talk with me, the talk that I joked about being an intervention. We haven't talked in a couple years either.
Yeah.
And we never had an unfriending moment. We never had a moment where we walked away from each other.
Right.
We just stopped talking.
Yeah.
And I'm still there. I love her, and I hope we're able to pick back up again one day.
Yeah.
But it was, that conversation was kind of pivotal, I think, in terms of where she saw me heading.
Right.
And it was interesting because, she was in town and she was still working on, I knew her from entertainment, and I worked on a lot of social justice projects when I was in entertainment. So I worked with comedians and I sold comedy projects. One of the projects I sold was a television show called Totally Biased with W. Kamau Bell on FX, which is a thoroughly social justice kind of comedy show. And I did not everything that I did was completely saturated with social justice, but a lot of it was. And we kind of worked in the same sphere in that we were both into this ideology and in entertainment. And so anyway, the last time I saw her, she was doing a documentary about a transgender child in Texas. And so even that, my opinion had started changing a little bit about the transgender activist part
Right.
of social justice. Right. And the way that the transgender act, and I say transgender activist part, because they don't speak for all transgender people. much like this ideology pretends to speak for Black people. It
Right.
pretends to speak for women.
Mm-hmm.
It pretends to speak for trans people. But I know trans people who are not woke and who are trying to say, please stop talking, for me.
Right.
But the transgender activist part of this ideology, I had started to depart from it in that I don't believe that it's wise to give children puberty blockers or hormone treatment, and I have other thoughts about kids transitioning that would probably are diametrically opposed to what they used to be and to what her opinions are. So yeah, we haven't really, I don't know.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked in a while.
No, I understand.
But I love her.
Right. So why do you think like that people are so like accepting to like social justice argumentation, kind of movement, especially from what I've seen, especially young people, and even then, like young like white people are like extremely attracted to this movement for some reason. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, I do. White women in particular. White women seem to make up, just anecdotally, seem to make up most of the social justice groups I'm in. I'm still in a lot of online social justice groups on Facebook, and just to see like what they're talking about and how the terminology evolves and how the concepts, because it's always evolving.
Right.
They're always coming up with new terms and phrases. They're very obsessed with language and controlling language. And so, anyway, I'm in a lot of these groups, and it's predominantly white women who preach this very ardently. There's people of all
Right.
identities, but as they would say, but a lot of white women. I think part of it is because it is an ideology of the upper class
Mm,
in a way.
mm,
It's kind of an elite system. It's a luxury belief system.
mm.
And so most of the people, I mean, look at its roots. Where did it come from?
Right.
I was indoctrinated into this at Duke University, which is an elite university. The people who learned it decades ago, and there were people learning it before me. It's older than 20 years. It came from academia. It came
Right.
from these very elite institutions, and now we've reached a point in culture where it's filtered down to the mainstream,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like all of these people who were very privileged. You look at the people who were able to go to these schools and be indoctrinated into this belief system. It's a privilege to go to a place like Yale, which is
Right.
thoroughly immersed, or a place like Harvard, and then they go out into the world, and like I did, they get jobs working in entertainment, in the media, in big social companies, and they may not be the majority of Americans, but they have a big voice, and they have a lot of power in
Right.
terms of what they're doing with their lives in terms of careers. And they're taught at university, they're not taught how to think, they're taught to become activists. They're taught what to think.
Mm-hmm.
And they're sent out to the world to push this belief system. And so now what have they done? Well, now I brought it into comedy. Other people were trying to bring it into comedy too, but I was one of the people trying to bring it into comedy, into entertainment. There are people bringing it into the newsrooms. There are people bringing it into Google. There are people who have brought it into our elementary schools,
Right.
and into our churches. And now you've got kindergartners who are learning about critical race
Yeah.
theory, the kind of stuff that used to just be at these really elite institutions. Now in your public schools, or your kids are learning
Yeah.
it now.
I saw a
So I'm getting a little off subject.
No, yeah, I had saw a commercial where it was like the Barbie dolls, or it wasn't even a commercial. I think it was like some kind of YouTube ad where Barbie was talking to some black Barbie, and
Oh, I saw
they were
it.
talking about racism, and it's like, clearly they're trying to direct that to kids, and I think I had flipped by like Nickelodeon one time, or maybe I was watching ESPN or something, and this commercial with kids talking about we need to stop racism, like as I don't know, to me I was like, you guys have no idea what you're even talking about, but like you said, it's being pointed and directed to the children,
Children.
Which-
The corporations. That's a good point. Is it's now being preached by by all of our our
Yeah.
major
Yeah, it
corporations.
is.
And that, because it's reached that level now, I think it's kind of incredible that they still try and keep a straight face and tell us that this is about being against the system,
Right.
that they're somehow the resistance, and that this belief system is pushing back against the status quo. I'm like, the status quo? You guys are being, McDonald's is tweeting your
Right,
ideology.
right. The NBA, you
You
know.
are, yeah, the NBA is tweeting your ideology. You're thoroughly part of the system.
Right.
Now, but yeah, so but to get back to your point, I think it's a luxury belief system. That's where it started. And so I think you see a lot of upper to middle class people who are preaching it. And part of that probably comes from some kind of, for some people, some kind of guilt, maybe,
Right.
at the class privilege that they have. Peggy McIntosh, the white woman who coined the phrase white privilege back in the 80s. If you look into Peggy McIntosh's story, if you look at her biography, and there was a great piece on her in Quillette. It was called Unpacking Peggy McIntosh's Knapsack, because her first essay about white privilege was called Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack. But Peggy McIntosh was loaded. She was one of the 1%, and lived a very unusual life for any American. And I imagine that much like Marx, who lived a very comfortable life, that maybe some people have a bit of guilt about that, and then it becomes easier to look around and say, well, I share this with every one of my race, right? We all have this immense privilege, right? It's like, I think some of what we're talking about is just your particular case.
Right.
but but I think that appeals to people maybe who have some kind of class guilt or something. But I think it also appeals to women more than men, because women are, if you look at the Big Five personality test, women on average, there's always outliers, there's always people who don't fit the average, but on average, women are higher in agreeableness than men, and higher in neuroticism than men. And I think being higher in agreeableness makes you more susceptible to something like this, because this belief system is about defending the underdog and not offending anyone and taking care of people's feelings. And there's something about women too, I think, that's just it has to do with their innate kind of biological drive to take care of kids. I've heard Jordan Peterson talk about this before, that maybe there's something there where women are sort of transferring this biological drive to protect their young onto marginalize these sort of vague terms of marginalized people. I'm going to go preach this because I care about protecting all the oppressed people, right?
Yeah. Did you see the video? It recently kind of went viral a few days ago about the mom having her kids like bow down, and they were like worshiping, and they were saying all hail like the black woman. Like it was like they were like 5-year-olds. They couldn't have been older than like 8. The oldest one. And so I don't know, just what you reminded me just about kids, and I'm thinking about like social justice, it being a religion. Like what do you think about that?
No, I think you're right. I think a lot of people have made that comparison, and for good reason, because it's really obvious. I mean, I'm sure you've thought about this too. And one of the things I think they've borrowed the concept of original sin, but instead of calling it sin, they call it privilege.
Right.
And another difference is that they don't believe everyone's born with the same amount of original sin or the same amount of privilege. So your amount of privilege depends on what race you are and what sex you are, and on this whole idea of intersectionality. But they borrowed the way in which privilege works in this belief system is a lot like sin. They confess it. They confess it publicly.
Right.
When they come, it's like when they have their some of these celebrities who have their like public come to social Jesus moment with their social justice Jesus, and they will confess their white privilege on Twitter. They'll go online,
Yes.
and it's like this weird kind of religious sort of thing that they're engaging in.
Right.
the thing is, they never stop confessing it
Yeah.
in a way.
Well, because they can't, because in that social justice ideology, you'll never stop being a racist. You'll always,
Yes.
like, once a racist, always a racist. It's that same mantra, that
Yeah.
same kind of, concept, is that you'll never stop being a racist. What you can do is you brought this up, just be an ally, do the work of social justice, that kind of language, but to me, that's one of the saddest parts is, like, I couldn't imagine, I talked about this, like, man, when I was on your show, like, man, if I was white, people would hate me because I would not care, like, if people thought I was racist. Like, I know I'm not racist. So, you know, to me, I can't imagine what would bring someone who's white to this idea that says, yeah, you're always a racist, even if you're not. Like, man, I struggle with that.
Yeah. I think it's that well, we may have talked about this on our show, so if I'm repeating myself, I
No,
apologize.
go
But
ahead.
this is one of the things I've been thinking of lately. Robin DiAngelo, who pushes this, and she
Hmm.
has a book called White
Yep.
Fragility, which is really popular right now. Um, she, in that book, confesses to being a racist,
Yep.
and not just in the way that they do in this belief system where they say you're born with this inherent bias, implicit bias. She confesses and tells a story about how she was going to a picnic and she looked at the two groups of people and she started to panic inside because she didn't want to have to sit with black people. And it's like, whoa, lady, like
Right.
that is very racist of you. But what did she do with that belief? Instead of working on it or figuring out why she had this bias, she is attracted to this belief system and then becomes one of the high priestesses in this belief system. That
Right.
tells you that it's almost comforting in a way because it tells her, or anyone, like any white person like her who does have racist ideas or opinions or beliefs or prejudices, it tells them, hey, it's okay. All white people
Right.
have these. You're born with
Right.
these. And it sort of spreads the guilt around. So it's less like a personal responsibility thing. It's like, it's not my fault we're all born this way. And this is
Right.
the way I try and combat it, is by talking about it. And then what does that do in this belief system? That makes her one of the good white people because
Right.
now she's confessed this thing that supposedly all white people have.
Right.
And then she gets to go and sell books and make a lot of money off of
Yeah.
her own racism. It's kind of crazy.
Racism sells, you know what I
But,
mean?
but yeah, I think it's appealing to people who have that. Just one more anecdote like that it makes me think of is it's just like when Morgan Spurlock had his Me Too moment. The director, he did a Me Too moment where he online wrote a blog and he confessed to having like a whole history of inappropriate interactions with women, some of them sexual, in his career. And instead of just apologizing for what he did, at the end of it, he did what the social justice people do. He tried to spread the guilt around.
Wow.
He suddenly stopped talking about himself and he started talking about we men
Yeah.
do this, men that. And it was like, wait a minute. Seems like you're trying to let yourself off the hook a little
Yes.
bit. Like,
Yes.
oh, weird, right? Like,
I've seen, we talked about like this kind of coming into Christianity. I've seen kind of when pastors kind of have that, that woke moment, that social justice moment. They'll just preach a sermon and they'll repent for all their racism, but it's not the racism that you and I would see as disgusting. It's this faux racism, this pseudo racism. And one of the things I've seen, maybe you can attest to it as well, because just bringing up the Robin DiAngelo's example, that this real racism, like the one with her not wanting to sit with black people, which is racist, that's
yes.
actually minimized, and the faux racism is kind of the greater offense. Have you seen
Yes.
that?
Oh my gosh, Chris, that's an excellent point. Yes, that's exactly what they're doing. So then she doesn't have to deal with that personal,
Nope.
the responsibilities on her for having that messed up
Yeah.
prejudice thing inside of her. And then it becomes, oh, but there's this greater kind of faux racism
Right.
I'm going to address.
Right.
And yeah. And then, by the way, there's no solutions in this belief
No,
system because what they do is they tell all these white women who presumably do have racist beliefs, they tell them that to fix their racism, they need to judge and treat people differently on the basis of race. They tell them it's impossible to be colorblind in the way that you see and treat people. They purposefully conflate the two different meanings of color. Like there's colorblind as in I literally cannot distinguish between colors. Right. They conflate that. They say, well, no, we're not colorblind. We can see what race we each are. And it's like, yeah, that's true. But colorblind also means, and James Lindsay points this out a lot, colorblind also means in the way that you behave towards people, in the way that you judge people, prejudge people, and in the way that you treat people. You can choose to be you can be colorblind there, but they try to say, well, because we're not colorblind, meaning that we do see color, therefore we can't stop ourselves from treating people differently on the basis of race. So they say the solution is just to go ahead and treat everybody differently on the basis of race, but to invert things. And the way that they're telling us that we should behave in a racist way, to treat people differently on the basis of race, is somehow better, that this is somehow going to fix things. But it doesn't. Like there's an example I've given before. If people have heard me talk before, they've heard this example, but I think it's just so symbolic of how twisted this ideology is and how it harms. They like to use that word harm, but it harms the ability of people to actually make friends and make connections with people of a different race. In one of these social justice groups I'm in, which is mostly white women, there are white women in there who come and they're like, I saw one. She's like, I don't know how to make friends with a black woman. I've been trying, and I just can't seem to make any friends of women of color. And what's some advice? And she's asking other white SJW women. And then she told an example. She said, this woman just moved to my town, a black woman, and I was trying to think of opening questions or topics that I could talk about with her, but I can't ask her where she's from because that's a racist microaggression. And it's like, whoa, do you even hear yourself? Seriously. Like you're not looking at her as a human being. You're looking at her as a black woman. Right. And then you're treating her differently, and you were actively stopping yourself from behaving towards her the way that you would towards a white woman. You're stopping yourself from asking her where she's from. You would ask a white woman that. Right. Why can't you ask her? Maybe that's an important question. You both find out you've got relatives in the same place, right. And you know, like, what is wrong with you? And no wonder I kind of want to shake these women sometimes, because I'm like, no wonder you haven't made any friends. Right. Who are women of color, because they could probably smell the desperation coming off of you, like the stench of it. like, hello, black woman.
Right.
Want to be your friend.
Right. It's like, quit being a creep. Maybe that's the first part, like, like, just be yourself. And like, if she likes you, great. If she doesn't, okay, move it on. Great. Like, it is what it is. I can't imagine just like, we're just talking about how this ideology permeates even basic, like, conversations with people. But I can't imagine just waking up every day and just thinking about racism, like, from the black perspective, like, oh yeah, it's a white man, he's racist. And, from the white person's perspective, I'm such a racist. Like, I think I've seen you talk about this, but, the social justice movement, like, it's a movement that produces bitterness, angerness, and like resentfulness, and I'm thinking, like, why would a Christian want to be a part of that movement when the Bible clearly talks about the Christian, like, should be producing joy? Like, what do you think about that?
That's a good question. And I guess I probably need to think about that one more, because I was really surprised when I became a Christian to find social justice in the church.
Wow.
I guess I was a bit naive in terms of how far it had spread.
Yeah.
And when I started to see it infiltrating some of the churches and hearing some of my old cult of belief infecting, I would say infecting churches.
Yeah, totally.
It took me aback. And then I also met so two of my friends who are former social justice warriors, both of whom were also in it for about 2 decades, like me. So I'm not the only one. One of them is a woman named Gracie West. She's an author, and she's online at Embarrassing Mom, if anybody wants to find her. She was a social justice warrior for about 20 years, also in the Christian church.
Mm.
And so was Monique Dusson, who you may know her
Yes.
from the Center for Biblical
Yes.
Unity.
Yes.
So Monique was also in it for 20 years.
Wow.
In the Christian church, she
Mm-hmm.
was social justice. And having met these two women blew my mind, because I was like, again, I just thought of it as this sort of secular thing, because
Right.
that's the part of social justice I was in.
Mm-hmm.
But why would a Christian get pulled into it? Well, I think that like I said, it borrows a lot from
Right.
Christianity, and so it appeals to some of the things that Christians might be more likely to pay attention to or
Mm-hmm.
be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
It sells itself as being about justice.
Right.
It sells itself as being about ending bigotry and ending racism and ending sexism and ending oppression and championing the marginalized. And so I think some people who are attracted to Christianity and maybe find themselves in a Christian church, they might also be open to this belief system because of the way that it markets itself.
Yeah. No, I
Um,
totally agree with that. Um, oftentimes, yeah, just what you're talking about, just hijacking even like biblical terms and categories, but redefining them. So like, repentance doesn't mean, repenting for personal sin that you yourself have done, but because, you're in this lineage of white supremacy, America, we all know, right? White people are racist. So you're not, yeah, you might not have personally have done it, which takes kind of the redefinition of sin as well away from it. But your forefathers, had slaves or something like that, or they were in
mhm.
this system, that which benefited whites over blacks. And so to me, it's I hate to see like these redefinition of terms, especially as a Christian from the Bible. That's one of
Yeah,
the really major concerns I see. You know.
yeah. I think it is. I think it's diametrically opposed to the
Oh
gospel.
yeah.
And one of the first people I saw writing about this, who I really was inspired by, was our mutual friend Samuel Say.
Yes.
That's how I first
Yes.
discovered
Yes.
you. Was he talked to you, and I saw he did a great essay about social justice and the gospel, which really caught my attention,
Hmm.
because I was freshly out of the social justice world, and I had become a Christian recently and had just started, had my eyes open to the fact that it was in the Christian church too.
Hmm.
And so reading him was a lifesaver, because I felt with all of my being like, "No, this is not what Jesus is about.
Hmm.
Jesus is not about collectivism and assuming the guilt of other people
Hmm.
and finding your salvation through repentance for things that you haven't done.
Hmm.
um, Jesus isn't about judging you on the basis of your skin color or your sex or your sexuality. Like Jesus doesn't look at you and say, "Okay, Chris, you're black, uh, so I'm going to give you some marginalized points, but you're also a man, so I'm going to give you some privilege points, and I'm going to need you to confess your male privilege and to use your male privilege to be an ally to women, and to like none of this stuff
Right.
is stuff Jesus was concerned about."
Yes.
Um, and I think it just kind of, I don't know, I think it pollutes the way.
Mm.
I think it pollutes the truth.
Yes.
Um, I don't know if I'm being very articulate tonight,
No,
but
no, I totally get where you're coming from. For me, it's like in the name of equality, these guys create so much inequality. For example, I saw Joe Biden tweet out, we're gonna have our efforts for black and brown, Asian, and it was like all these minorities, and white people were missed in that. So it's like in the name of equality, we're only going to favor these people. It's like, how is that equality? How can you call that justice when it's not when it doesn't take an account to all people? Because
yeah,
justice does not create inequality. And so to me, I see a lot of that going on. We're talking about in the church. um, I saw this famous pastor one time say, in regards to like let's say it was in the context of him like looking for a pastor. He said he would rather a black six, one who's more as qualified. He'd rather a black six than a white seven. And so I'm like, you would rather the less qualified person simply on the basis of his skin color.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
guess what that does? You have a person who's less qualified, who's not the better pastor. So now that creates problems in the church because you would have the better pastor who maybe could handle some of those issues that the black person
Yeah.
isn't handling. But because of your white guilt, whatever, you want simply on the basis of a skin color,
Was that a white preacher saying
Yes,
that?
it was a white
Oh
preacher
yeah.
saying it.
That makes sense to me anyway.
And-
Yeah, that makes sense. Cause see now he gets to feel like he's one of the good ones.
Yes, he's an
Yeah.
ally. He's with us. He gets it. Like,
Yeah,
that
he
was
gets it.
that was the language that was used in a book, pretty much. That he gets it. And one of the things that I find so just kind of it's saddening. Someone like me, Samuel Say, name any black conservative who says, "Hey, this thinking should not be tolerated." The common language is, "Well, see, you're not really black." I mean, even Joe Biden said it. Like, "Hey, you don't vote for me, you
Yeah.
ain't really black." And
Yeah.
you have so many people in the Christian church. Even secular, you have that as well, where if you do not think like me, you're not really black. It was this week I heard that you may be my skin folk, but you're not my kinfolk.
Oh gosh.
I,
Yeah.
I laugh because it's like I could care less, but
Yeah.
it's just funny that there are people who think black is an ideology, not an
Oh yeah.
not an ethnicity.
Oh, they've started explicitly saying that now.
Right.
They used to hide that, but now they're saying it. Now they're saying that it is a way that it's ideology.
Wow.
They have to come up with a reason to explain why. See, this belief system says it especially gets white people to believe who are in it, white people who are in social justice to believe that all black people have the same opinion.
We're all monolithic.
Yes. And so they have to explain to all of these woke white people why there are black people who are not going along with the belief system.
Right.
They have to figure out how to explain it. And they haven't found a really good way of doing that yet. This is why when you said if you were white, you think a lot of people would hate you because you wouldn't go along with the white guilt stuff. But I always thought you're probably more hated as a black person who's not going along with it because, and maybe I'm wrong, but I would assume it like someone looks at you and they say, Chris, your beliefs and the fact that you're willing to speak your beliefs and that they're a direct contradiction to what we are teaching people. Like you embarrass us.
No, traitor,
Yeah.
You're like, yeah.
So they try and do something similar with women. But what they do with women is they pretend that, well, first of all, they completely erase black women who don't agree with the belief system.
Mm-hmm.
They pretend that all of the women who don't agree with it, that they're all white. And then what they do is they say, well, sometimes they'll say you have internalized misogyny and that's why you're not going along with it. But more often than not, what they do is they fall back on well, that's your white privilege thing.
Right.
Your white privilege outweighs, you being an ally to your fellow, feminists,
Right.
your fellow sisters.
Right.
That you want to hold on to your white privilege, and that's more important to you than gender equality.
Yeah.
But it's weird. It always comes back to identity. Sometimes I'll post in some of these social justice groups I'm in. But some of the ones I'm in, I stay quiet just because I want to stay in there. I don't want to get kicked out, and I want to see what people are talking about. But occasionally, I'll speak up and I'll say something, and I did that recently. And you can guess what the responses were without even having been in there. The first 2 or 3 responses were all about my race and my sexuality, because those are the 2 things they can look at me and say, what they're looking at you immediately, and they're looking at your race and your sex and your sexuality and all, and they're trying to figure out what oppressor groups are you in. So I'm going to say that your opinion is because of whatever oppressor groups you're in, right? And so they immediately, and it's just it's kind of crazy that you can be in this belief system and not see that, not see how racist and sexist your belief system is. True. But they've conveniently changed the definitions of racism and sexism. So you have all these people who are like, oh, well, I guess it's not racist to attack her for her race immediately. The definition's been changed.
I was in a Christian Facebook group where it was a pro-black group, and they would allow white people in, but they would pretty much tell them, if you want to be a part of this group and not get kicked out, you have to be silent and like learn. Like, and not too many white people can comment on a particular post. It was like insane, that there are people who are thinking like this. One of the things, just because I'm an apologist, I like to do, presuppositional apologetics and things like that. I was having a conversation with someone about what happened at the Capitol, and they were saying, and I'm sure you've heard this line of thinking too about that event. If it was all black people, they would have been shot up, and so
I've heard that,
and I was saying, hey, no, here's why, here's my reasoning why I don't think that's true, and they were disagreeing, and so I just used their argument back to them. Well, I'm black. Why aren't you listening to my voice? Why aren't you hearing me? Don't you think we should? Why, you're just using your privilege, and then, it's funny, they didn't accept it when it came to that.
They don't.
No. But.
Well, that it makes me think of that Bible verse about by your fruits you shall know them. Mm-hmm. Because one thing about social justice warriors is they don't believe their own bull crap.
Right.
Oh, I almost said that word. They don't believe their own crap.
Yes, you're right.
And you can tell that they don't believe it in a few simple ways. One is the way that you just illustrated by doing that. They say, we believe that white people should shut up and listen to black voices. Right. Okay? They say that. But the second that a black person says something that doesn't agree with SJW ideology, you see what they really believe, because they do not shut up and they do not listen. Right. And in fact, they will attack you, and they'll attack your race, and they do not believe that truly that we need to shut up and listen to black people. What they believe is that we need to shut up and listen to social justice ideology. And they prefer if there's two people, one's white, one's black, they're both speaking social justice ideology, well, then they're going to say, give more weight to what the black person is saying. But they have to both be speaking social justice ideology for them to give more weight to the black person. If you've got a white person speaking social justice ideology and a black person who's not, they're not going to listen to the black person at all. Right. They're just listening to the white person. They are more than happy to tell the black person to shut up and listen to the white person, because that white person is speaking social justice. So it's like they don't even believe their own words. They walk around. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit animated.
No, go ahead. Get it.
They walk around with these shirts and these signs that say silence equals violence, which is a lie. And by the way, it's a dangerous lie, because what they're trying to do, like I said before, they're very concerned with controlling language. And one of the things they're trying to do is to get us culturally to accept this idea that violence and speech are the same thing. And if we've done that, if we get to that point where we've accepted that words or silence, lack of words, can be violent, well, then they feel like they can justify, at that point, they can justify actual physical violence against you for having the wrong opinion or the wrong beliefs or the wrong words or the lack of words. They can use violence, and they can say it's self-defense because, words are violence and silence is violence, and I'm just using my violence back in self-defense. That's what they're trying to do with that. But they'll walk around with these signs and these shirts, and a lot of the people who have them, they've never thought any of this stuff out. And I've had an argument with someone at a protest who had a big sign that said silence is violence. And when I tried to talk to her, she was basically like, shut up. It's your job to shut up as a white person, and listen to me. And it was like, so, but I thought, if you truly believe silence is violence, you wouldn't be telling me to be silent.
Right.
I mean, I'm silent. Like, it's like you don't even believe the thing is on your side.
Right. How? Yeah. It's so crazy because I think we've seen it especially this week about you know and we've seen it in the past, just this canceling of conservative voices. If you're black, you're going to get canceled. If you're white, just shut up. You don't even need to be talking. Um, you know, I mean, we saw it with Trump. He got removed from like all any kind of like social media. Like I don't even know if he has a Spotify, but they canceled the man anyway. Like we don't even want you to have a playlist. Like like what is up with that? Like, man, that's the thing. Like but that's why I'm so confident, in the truth of the scriptures of the gospel, is because that's the only way you can silence us, if you just like cancel us. But even in that, you won't cancel God. You can't cancel God.
Yeah.
But that's I don't have to cancel the left because I know they have irrational thoughts. Irrational ideologies. Like, I want you to speak because I want people to hear how crazy you
Yes.
sound. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm willing to combat with people who have these thoughts. Who holds to these ideologies. But oftentimes, I'm sure you've seen it, I don't see the same level of maturity, level of willingness and engagement from people who are on the left. That's why it's like, man, people are losing followers. People are getting suspended. It's crazy.
Yeah, they don't. Well, this is another way in which it's like a cult. They don't actually allow for dissent. So they don't want to hear other voices.
Right.
They don't want to hear opposing opinions. They just want you to accept and speak the ideology.
Right.
And so a lot of the phrases and the terms that they come up with, that they coin, they're always coining new words, again, obsessed with language.
Right.
A lot of those phrases and words, if you look at the way they use them, they're simply using them as, like, I call them magic words, like Batman dropping a smoke bomb. They will drop these magic words to shut down conversation.
Right.
So if you say, well, I don't agree, I think this, and they'll be like, that's your male privilege,
Right.
boom,
Oh.
and they'll walk away.
Oh, no.
Like, end of conversation, right? Or they'll say, it's if you ask them to defend their opinion, like if they speak a social justice tenet of belief, and you say, well, why do you believe that? Because I believe this, and here's why. Can you explain why you believe that? And they'll say, it's not my job to educate you. Boom! And just leave.
Google it, you
or
lazy.
They'll say, Google it, or they'll say, it's emotional labor. You're asking me to do emotional labor. Boom! I don't have to. But everything is a roadblock to prevent discussion. They'll even have, I don't know if you've heard this one. We did an SJW bingo card and we put a bunch of their magic words on it. And one of their magic words is sea lion. Have you heard that one?
No, I haven't heard that one.
Okay. You've got to look up
boy.
sea lion.
Oh, boy.
A sea lion it's sort of like a troll, but it's a little different. A sea lion is what they'll call you if you ask sincere questions.
Oh, wow.
Like if you're sincerely like, okay, like I'd like to have a conversation about this, and here's why I think this. What do you think about this? And they'll say, oh, what a sea lion! I've got a sea lion here, and then they'll leave.
Oh, what? So, that's crazy.
Yeah, they also use gaslighting.
Yes.
They misuse that term. That term, it actually, it comes from psychology. It originally came based on that movie, that old movie Gaslight, but which was about a husband who was trying to make his wife think she was crazy. And in psychology, they use gaslighting to mean, someone who's trying to get you to think that what's happening is not actually happening, that you're going crazy, someone who tries to make you question your own sanity. Well, they misuse that term all the time. If you disagree with them, they'll say, stop gaslighting me. It's like, I'm not, this is called disagree. This is what disagree is.
No, so true.
Anyway, I'm going on a tangent.
No, it's good.
But you had a great point. It's like, they don't want conversation. And that's why I get so excited when I meet another liberal, because I do meet liberals and progressives, by the way, who are not social justice. There's some of them out there. There's still some of them out there.
There are.
And whenever I meet someone on the left who's not woke, it's so refreshing.
Yes, it is.
It's like, we can actually have a conversation, and we can agree on some things and disagree on some things. And And that's so exciting, because then conversation has a point.
Right.
You're actually arriving somewhere.
Yes.
Maybe you change your beliefs a little bit, or they change theirs, or maybe you strengthen your beliefs and they strengthen theirs, or maybe you discard some beliefs or they discard some, but you're actually, something is happening in the conversation. You're understanding them better, they're understanding you better. That's beautiful. You can't do that with someone who's in a cult.
Right.
All their words are used to stop that,
Right.
stop any kind of back and forth.
Right. No, that's so true. Kind of reminds me of, like, if you've ever had a conversation with a Mormon, which I believe is a cult, they you'll just go through the line about how Mormonism is false, and they'll end the conversation with something like, "You've really strengthened my faith in the prophet of Joseph Smith," or something like that. Like how are you more strengthened when you just got dismantled? So I totally agree with this. For them it's supposed to be these buzzwords for them that I don't know, ends the conversation or something like that. But there's some interesting Twitter questions. If you have the time, I'd definitely like to get into. Someone asked, how did you perceive Christians when you were in the social justice movement?
Well, I was specifically in a secular part of the social justice movement, as I mentioned.
Yes.
So there are definitely, and as I mentioned, I have some friends who were Christians while also preaching social justice, and so they would have a different answer than me.
Mm-hmm.
But because I was in the secular part of the social justice world, I looked down my nose at Christians. Mm-hmm. So I thought, I mean, this is shameful, but whatever, tell the truth.
Right.
I thought it was a sign of lower intelligence to have a belief in a specific God, and to have a belief in the Bible and in the stories of the Bible. And I believed the Bible was not scientifically accurate, and therefore could not have any truth, could not be truth or God's truth, Mm-hmm. And I believed I was smarter than most religious people. I was very arrogant. My aunt in particular she's a Southern Baptist, and I've said this, I've talked about her a little bit recently, yes. So bear with me, but she's a bit of a judgmental kind of Southern Baptist, but she would write me these very nakedly judgmental letters where she would talk about how I was going to go to hell, but she was very concerned with my soul. I didn't get that at the time, right. That her belief was very sincere, even if she wasn't expressing it in the best way. And I would write her letters back, because in college I was learning all this stuff, and I would write letters back about how she was part of a white supremacist culture, and that she was part of everything that's wrong in the world, and she's so backwards and like Neanderthalish, and so I definitely had this very judgmental attitude towards Christianity. And it's weird, because the church I go to now, I go to a really great church. If you're ever in the Austin area, I would suggest this church. It's in Georgetown, Texas. It's called the Church on the Square. And my preacher, Bradley Helgerson, we got to do an interview with him. He's brilliant. And actually, since I've become a Christian, I've met some of the most intelligent people I've ever met in Christianity.
Yes.
And I was so wrong. I've been humbled many times. And, but one of the things he talks about, I've heard him talk about, is defeater beliefs that people have that keep them from being open-minded towards the idea of God, or towards the possibility of there being a God or a creator. And he says it's almost like imagine if you lived in a culture where most people had not yet heard of Christ or heard of the Bible. So you haven't heard of it before. So the first time you're hearing about it, you might be more open-minded than you would be in a culture like ours, where most people have heard of it and even rejected it in some cases. So in a way, they've been inoculated against it. He's like, in a way, when you go out and you try to talk about your belief now, your Christian belief, or talk about God, you're going to be encountering a lot of people who have these defeater beliefs. They've already been preconditioned in a way where they're not going to be an open mind towards what you're saying. And I thought that was really interesting. I hadn't really thought about that before, but that's definitely where I was at. I had been inoculated against it. I'd put it that way. And God really, like, oh my goodness, like there's a verse in the Bible that really speaks to me. It's in there a couple of times where God says, I will put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth, and I will steer you back onto the path. And that is what happened to me.
Amen.
Some people do not find God until he puts that bit in their mouth and the hook in their nose. And it's like a rock bottom moment, but like you could compare it to
Right.
an addiction where you finally are willing to change. It was like that. God, like, it was a rocky path for me, and it had to. I was so stubborn. I would never have come to God if I hadn't been like the prodigal son who spent all but my fortune and was penniless and eating pig food, and like that was like, hey,
Right.
hey, there's something. I'm at the lowest place
Right.
ever, and then you come up, and this sounds so cheesy, but it's like, you know, I had to get to the darkest place personally before I could see the light. And
No,
that's
so true. That's that's what the Bible says, and so man, I'm always encouraged when, you know, I see people that are Christians and they're holding it down, and so I'm definitely encouraged like by you seeing the things you post, and man, to me it excites me. I love Christians, and so to see them pressing on in the faith in hard times, to me that's encouraging. We need that, especially in times like this. And someone asked kind of a question like that. As a new Christian, how does the gospel of peace apply for you in times of violence or times that are hard?
oh that's a difficult one
Right.
because I struggle with anger and
As a, yeah, yeah, yeah.
not as
I get it. I get it.
not as much as I used to, or maybe I'd say uh, because I have God now, I have something I didn't have before when I struggled with anger, so it's different now. But I still will struggle with it, and
Sure.
I'll go through low moments where I feel not very like I'm not walking in step with God. Where I will give in to anger. It's not the way it used to be though. I used to, as a social justice warrior, it's like the anger is always right there,
Yeah.
just beneath the surface, like the anger, the resentment, and it's different now. It's more of like me trying to figure out the difference between righteous anger and sort of egotistical or selfish or resentful anger. Like, what's the difference between those two things? That's something I've been thinking about a lot, and anyway, what is this is a question about peace in a time of violence. Okay, here's how I can best answer this. I do not believe, well, first of all, I don't believe in violence as a means to a just ends like social justice people do. And that's one of the big reasons why I had to leave social justice is once I realized that they are okay with violence as a means. I believe in what Dr. Martin Luther King talked about. I believe in the non-aggression principle. I believe in violence only as self-defense and not self-defense against words or ideas, which is what they push,
Right.
but actual self-defense
Right.
against someone who's using violence against you. And when it comes to conversations, what Jesus talks about, like loving your enemy, is really very hard. And I've started to realize that I think I was reading some C.S. Lewis, and he was talking about how it's really easy to love people that you like.
Right.
And it's much harder to love people you don't like. And that was the first time I had ever really thought about how it's okay if I don't like someone. And that it's still possible for me to try and work towards loving them, even without liking them.
Right.
And I don't know if that makes sense,
No, I get
but
it.
yeah.
You reminded me of something that so my love for rap and Christian rap. I reminded of one of my favorite artists who says, if you think Meek is weak, just try being meek for a week I think that is a good line because, Jesus is the ultimate epitome of, who we need to be. He's the perfect man, and it's hard. Man, I often am blown away how righteous Jesus was when I reflect on me and I'm like, how could he not sin once? You know what I mean? Like in word,
Yeah.
in thought, in deed. Like man, it's truly
Oh
a
yeah.
you know just like behold the beauty of Jesus. When you're about to sin. And Lord willing, He'll keep you from sin. And so um,
Yeah.
it's just amazing thought.
It is. And this is one of those things where a lot of times I'm able to talk to people who are not Christian pretty easily about most things, even about some things about God.
Right.
And Carter, who's an atheist on my show on Unsafe Space, we talk about we have so much in common. We can talk about a lot, and he also humors me or is tolerant and kind when I talk about God. He doesn't mock me or make me feel like he's looking down on me or anything. Um, but then there are other conversations that I can only have with someone like you,
Right.
with a believer,
Right.
where I just think anybody listening who's not a Christian is just not going to get it, or
Right.
they're going to misinterpret what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what it is you're talking about there about try being meek for a week. That's one of those things that I think a lot of people just maybe they won't understand
Right.
what you mean by that, or they'll hear some kind of self-righteousness in it when there's
Right.
no self-righteousness in it
Right.
at all.
I'm
It's
saying
like,
I
no,
can't
no,
do
no.
it.
Yeah,
That's why I need Jesus because
yeah,
I recognize I'm not naturally meek.
yeah.
I'm weak, and I'm in need of His strength. I know we've been talking for a while, and so I want to thank you for coming on and chatting with me. Um, and yeah, we'll wrap it up here. And so, guys, thank you for listening. And till the next time, grace and peace.